So thank you all for, still being here. I'm really excited about this next talk. Our speaker is a senior content strategist at Insulet. Leah Catania defines the content strategy for user guides, including orchestrating the move from InDesign to a component content management system. Outside of work, she spends most of the time at the barn with her horse, and I'm going to ask her later what the horse's name is.
Her name is Bodhi, for the record.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for sticking around. Before I get started, I have a couple of questions for you. I would love to see a raise of hands. How many of you have ever had a stakeholder come to you and tell you exactly what to do with your documentation? Yeah. How many of you agreed with that stakeholder? No one. Okay. How many of you disagreed with the stakeholder? Yeah, everybody who had their hands up before. Unsurprising. So how many of you who disagreed still had to do it anyway? Not as many as I expected. Good for you guys, for you, all you folks. So for those of you who have been in the situation, for those of us who will be in the future, which is all of us, I am hopefully going to give you some strategies that will help you talk to your stakeholders in a language they can understand with real data and real examples that will help get their buy-in for what you want to do with the documentation. So we're going to do a little bit of an introduction into what competitive analysis is, and then how to prepare for one, review those competitors, analyze your results, and use them to convince your stakeholders and get their buy-in. As you heard Jody say, my name is Leah. For the last 5 years or so, I've been the primary content strategist at my jobs, and I've done quite a few very large content strategy shifts and brand new documentation types that have required a lot of stakeholder buy-in in order to move forward. And competitive analysis has been the backbone of how I have gotten that buy-in and been able to do those projects. So what actually is a competitive analysis? And I've heard a couple of people tell me here they have no idea what it is and no idea what this talk is about, which is fine. That's why you're here. Basically, it is a systematic way of looking at how your competitors do the exact same thing that you're doing, that you want to do, or that you're trying to do. And it can be extremely illustrative to see what other people out there are doing to solve the same problem that you have. It can generate a ton of ideas for you and your team. And it is incredibly effective at persuading your stakeholders to do what you want with the docs and get their buy-in. So who actually needs one? When would you use one? Basically, any time that you have a content strategy problem to solve, a comp analysis can help. These are just a couple examples of the times that I found them to be really useful. If you've got a big content strategy shift, or you are advocating for a content strategy shift, you know something's not working and you want to change it, very helpful. You might have a new documentation type. You're a UI software company that's suddenly producing APIs for integration, or you're a hardware company that's introducing software with the hardware, right? These are things you've never done before. You want to know where to even start. Branding, marketing, they love to throw all kinds of different changes at us, right? But it also gives you an opportunity to overhaul your document design. And it's a great opportunity, but you might not know where to start. And when you're deciding between two different solutions to the same problem, and you're not sure which one is right, it can be really useful to see how other people are trying to solve that same problem. And then finally, like we talked about earlier, you might be responding to a stakeholder ask. And these can be really tricky because they can often come from stakeholders that you really can't ignore, either your CEO or your VP of product. And when they have very strong opinions about what the documentation should look like, it can feel like it's impossible to change their minds. But the data and examples that you can get from a comp analysis can allow you to do just that. So if you want to be really thorough and have a very detailed comp analysis, prepare, prepare, prepare. That is the key. Basically, you need to be able to know, what do you actually want to find out today, right now? It is always good to have a written down goal and scope to return back to make sure you're staying relevant. I am the absolute worst when it comes to reading other people's docs. I look at it, I go, ooh, shiny, and I love it, and I get excited, and I fall down a rabbit hole, and there goes all the time I had allocated for my comp analysis on something totally irrelevant. So when you have a written goal and scope to return to, it really helps keep you on track. For your goal, you want to think about what are the high-level questions that you want to answer when you're looking at these comps, and why do you need to answer them now with this comp analysis? So here's an example. We want to find out how enterprise platform companies document their design systems for third-party UX designers and developers. And the reason that we needed to know this is because the company was going to start providing tools to allow UX designers and developers to build their own apps on our platform. We'd never done this before, so it was a brand new documentation type, and our stakeholders had a lot of opinions about what design system guides should look like from their research, which of course did not focus on the documentation. For your scope, you want to think about what type of doc are you looking for. Is it like a big doc set, like a design system guide? Is it just a piece of that doc set, like a type of content, release notes, API guides, UI procedures, hardware manuals, installation manuals? Whatever you want to look at, make sure you know what that doc type is before you start. You also want to think about what medium it's being provided in, whether that's HTML, PDF, printed, mobile. And then you also want to think about how many comps are you going to look at. And that's primarily going to be determined by how much bandwidth you have available. So for this goal, we knew we wanted to look at design system guides. We knew that it was UX designers and developers, and they were going to be using it at work. So they're most likely going to be on a laptop. They're going to want an HTML website in their browser at desktop size. We wanted to make sure we were not just looking at the content or the writing or the design, but all of them, which again, very big scope. And we knew we wanted to look at least 4 comps. Because the scope of the what was so large, we didn't think we would have bandwidth to do much more than that. And I found that between 4 and 8 is usually a pretty good number. You can get a good variety of examples with that and still be achievable, right? And if you have a smaller scope for the what, you might be able to look at more comps. Once you have your goal and your scope, you really need to make sure you know your audience. If your manager asks you to do this, or you're just trying to generate ideas for your team, you might not need to spend a lot of time here. But if you're pitching some kind of strategy shift, new doc type, something big to higher level stakeholders, this is really, really important. If you don't know what they value before you start, you might not end up with the data and examples that you need at the end, and then what was the point of putting in all of this work and effort? So, who actually is going to make the decision? Who is going to be able to greenlight you to go forward? If it's multiple people, who might be most likely to agree with you, and who might be most difficult to convince? Who do they consider to be your direct competition? So this is about what comps are you actually analyzing? You want to know exactly who they're looking at and whether they think they're good at what they do. For example, I had a VP who thought that SAP was the absolute best supply chain management software out there. She's not necessarily wrong, but I knew that if I didn't include them in my comps, she wouldn't listen to a thing I said. She wouldn't trust my recommendations, and her only response would be, well, what about SAP? What do they do? So if I didn't have them in the list, no matter what I felt about their writing choices, I couldn't go forward. You also want to know who your stakeholders aspire to be. So at that same company, the CEO didn't want to just make enterprise apps. He wanted a platform where people built apps. So we started adding Apple and Google into our comps list. We weren't competing with Apple and Google. No one at the company thought we were even trying to compete with Apple and Google. But our stakeholders considered them to be the best in the business at a platform that allows other people to build apps on it. So we used them to make sure that we were looking at the best in the business and how they did docs. And that's where you build your comp list from. When you're building your list, you really want to make sure that you're going through and finding the exact documents that you're going to look at during the review. That way, you don't have to go back and find the exact API guide that you think is most applicable to your situation later on. You've got that link right there wherever you're going to be taking notes. And if you have a company that you want to look at that is not in this list, you can still include them, but just make sure that you are prepared to defend why they're being included. Maybe they have the best docs in our industry, right? That's the reputation that they have here that our stakeholders wouldn't know about. Maybe they're doing something really unique or interesting that you're curious about and want to consider. So you've got your goal, your scope, you know your audience. Now you're going to get down into the details of the actual items that you want to analyze in all of these competitors. The more specific and thorough that you can be here, the better. And it might mean that you end up with a very long list, but a long list of very specific items is going to be a lot more helpful to you than a short and broad list. So this list here, content types, writing styles, doc design, very broad. It's basically just what we said in the scope, right? It's not going to be very easy to find very detailed examples, and you're probably going to end up with gaps that you're missing when you're done in analyzing all of those results. Whereas this list is a subset of a much larger list. But you can see here we've got, for content types, brand information, typography, colors. For writing styles, we've got voice. We had other things. And then for doc design and writing styles, we were looking at how do they do FAQs, tips, examples. So these are very specific. They lend you to looking for very specific examples that are going to make it much easier for you to build your proposal and show these examples to your stakeholders. And then once you've got those kind of general items defined, then you want to make sure you're really clear, especially if you're going to have people helping you with this project. Just saying examples is usually not good enough, right? What about examples do you want to know? Well, you want to know how they're integrated with the content, how they're displayed, how they're discussed. And those are things that you can kind of write as little sub-descriptions of your items to make sure everyone's kind of looking at the same information. And then sanity check it. Put it away, just like you would for proofreading. Put it away, bring it back out. What did you forget? Show it to your team, have them review it, have your stakeholders review it if you can, or have a manager or someone who knows the stakeholder really well try to look at it specifically from that stakeholder's perspective. Very helpful for making sure you haven't missed anything. These are just some common analysis items that I've used quite a bit in the comp analyses that I've done. So the information architecture of the TOC has been a big one, the access point for where people get to the docs, the IA for each topic individually, the depth of information that's included about different types of content, whether or not it links to other documentation, the design of notes and tips and warnings and cautions, whether or not PDFs are available, always a very hot topic, and search results and how they work, what they look like, things like that. So now you've done your preparation. It's the fun part. This is where you can actually go and review all of the docs. I am a nerd. I believe we are all nerds here. I love reading other people's docs. But I highly recommend sharing the burden if you can. When people ask me, how do you have bandwidth to do this? I hardly ever do it by myself. I might orchestrate it. I might prepare mostly by myself. But to do the review itself takes time. And it's much easier if you split it up amongst your team, right? If you can, split up the competitors between multiple people, have a kickoff meeting, make sure everyone knows what the goal and the scope is, review those individual items, answer people's questions so you're all on the same page, but then split up and do the work individually and then come back together at the end. Creating a central place for the notes is integral to this. I love spreadsheets. Someone once lovingly called my spreadsheet of doom, because it has lots of information in it, because they're not made to be pretty, they're just meant to log information. So I take that as a compliment. It works for me. Maybe something else will work for you. But the most important thing is just to have all those notes in a singular place so you can look across and look at just examples and what did every comp do for just examples. And then if you can, give people an example. Analyze one competitor ahead of time. Show them what you're looking for in terms of depth of information and detail and links provided. And then take copious notes. I cannot stress this enough. You will thank yourself later for taking copious notes. Focus on observations first. Just say, what did the comp do? Detail their choices, and try to be as objective as possible. Think of yourself as more of a fact finder here. So the example we've got here is very, very factual in terms of these are the choices people made about how they structured their release notes. They had one topic for the entire release, they had H2s for each area, and then H3s for each feature, and they used paragraphs to describe versus tables. Some folks use tables. And then once you've got that, you can then look at how those choices affect the user experience. And that's when you really need to think about not just whether you like it or don't like it, but why and how. does it affect the user experience, so that you can articulate that to your stakeholders. And put your links in now. If you're looking at doc sets with hundreds of topics, I guarantee you there will be examples that you find now where you do not remember where on earth they are in a week. Put the links in so that you can just go right in there, click it, open it up. It's going to make your life much easier when you're writing the doc, when you're building your proposal. You will thank yourself. These are just a couple of example notes. I was originally going to open my spreadsheets, but I decided to simplify everything, and they are screenshots. If you would like to see my spreadsheets of doom, hit me up on Slack. Let me know. I'm happy to share them. These are from our design system guide. So I'm not going to talk about the stuff that's in tiny font, I promise. This is my favorite way to set up a comp analysis notes. You've got along the top the individual comps for each column with the links to the items that people are analyzing. And then along the side, you've got the different items that you're looking for. And that really allows you to cross-reference. How did one comp do everything? How did all the comps do this specific thing? Things like that. And this one had so much information because it was so broad in scope that we broke it up into content types and how we presented that content. Now, one thing that's missing here are the copious notes. This was one of the first comp analyses that I did. Learned a lot. It was very great, but did not take enough notes. We put lots of links. We knew we needed links. We wanted to be able to reference them later. But we highlighted some stuff in green that we thought were good examples, and that was mostly it. A couple of notes here and there. What happened was, when we went back to say, well, what was actually good about that? Every single time we had to open it and analyze it over again. Right? Much easier if you write down what they did, all the choices they did, and then go, hey, this was great. I want to come back to this. This is a comp analysis I did later on release notes for enterprise apps. And you can see there's lots of notes. The scope of the what was much smaller, so much fewer links, because it was mostly all on a single topic. But you can see, like, for topic organization, very similar to what we talked about earlier with the H1, H2, and the feature description. But you can see on the H2, I put in my very informal, the H2 looks identical to the H1 because why? And that was my shorthand of just, this is confusing. I don't understand why they made this choice. It's very weird. We should not do this, right? And they don't have to be fully articulated, perfectly presented, right? These notes should be for you and your team. You can see here we've got links to documentation. That's a yes-no question. Could just be answered with a yes-no. We also put in some notes about how and why and what else was going on there. And then my ever-present white whale, the PDFs were available in every single comp except for one, and I could not make the argument. And that's where you need to remain objective, right? You want to get rid of PDFs, but the comp analysis says you should not, because that's your user's expectation. So now you've got all your notes, all your examples, copious words in spreadsheets and links. What did you actually discover? How do you put it together? Share and share alike. Organize a roundtable. Ask folks to analyze their own notes, aggregate their own thoughts and ideas on the patterns that they saw in their comps before this. If you can, give everyone a couple of days or a week between finishing the analysis and when you all meet so that you can think about what's stuck in my brain, right? If it's a couple of days or a week later and you're still thinking about something you saw in someone's documentation, that's noteworthy. You should talk about it. Whether it's good or bad, you should talk about it. Make sure you give everyone a chance to go around and share the best and the worst of what they found. What common patterns did you see? Was they doing something in more than half of your comps? If they are, that's something you should be paying attention to, for better or worse. Because it's generally, that means there's a user expectation for it. And then was there something really unique or interesting that only one or two of the comps did that you want to take and use? And this is how you build your proposal. And I really want to stress this. The comp analysis is never about just reviewing the comps. If you stop there, there's no point. Even if you present it to your stakeholders, like, what is the outcome that you want out of that? You need to take what you found and say, this is how we want to apply it to the docs, and make a plan for that. And this might be making an argument for the common patterns. It might be making an argument against the common patterns, right? Maybe you found one comp who did it really well, and everybody else is doing it terribly. You can make that argument. Or it might be taking a combination of things. So For our design system guide, we decided to take the depth of information from SAP and the information architecture from Atlassian. And we did that because SAP had really rich, detailed guidance and examples that was just really helpful. But we could never find the content. Right? We were looking for typography and colors like we saw earlier, and we just took forever to find it. Once we found it, it was fabulous, but finding it was terrible. So for Atlassian, they were later on the details. Our stakeholders probably wouldn't have been happy if we went that light. But the way they organized their IA was really clear, with clear labels, and it was set up based on what UX designers and developers think about when they are building these things. And so that's why we wanted to follow both of those patterns together. Now, the hard part, really the hardest part, convincing your stakeholders. First, you want to find the most compelling examples. What is going to grab their attention? What is striking? What is flashy? What is really interesting in a slide, unfortunately? Also, don't forget, you get to be aspirational. We get really stuck sometimes in our rut of I can't do X or I can't do Y. That isn't supported by my authoring tool, things like that. But just like the CEO gets to be aspirational in looking at Apple and Google, you also get to be aspirational in what you want to do with your docs. And maybe you can't implement it today. Maybe you can move one little baby step toward something like it, right? Or maybe you can say, hey, for a phase 2, we would really love to do this. Isn't this amazing? These are the resources that we would need to do that. You'd be surprised. Sometimes you can get buy-in that way if it's exciting enough to your stakeholders. And make sure you're showing them what gets you excited. There's a lot of passion here this weekend, right? Passion really shines through. If you show how excited and passionate you are about this, they're going to be more likely to take you seriously and more likely to be interested in those ideas. This is an example from our design system guide proposal. We were on Zoom, so the tiny text was not an issue. But this was not striking, not flashy, but it was very clear. And it really clearly illustrated how we wanted to change our writing styles, which is often very difficult to illustrate, right? When you're not just putting a bunch of words on a page. Which brings me to making sure that you illustrate everything. Your stakeholders, even your UX directors and UX VPs, if you're working under that department, they don't stare at documentation all day. If you don't show them what you're talking about, they're not going to be able to visualize it, and they're more likely to stick to their own thoughts and opinions instead of trusting your data. And you want them to trust your data. That's why you're doing all of this work. So use screenshots. Give live demos. Open up the docs that you want to look at, especially if they have some kind of interaction element like the navigation. Show them what that looks like. Show them how that works. And then if you can, put it into your own brand. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the actual end result. But when you put it into your brand, they can see what it looks like. They're not saying, well, this is great, but how would that actually work in our content, right? And that might be you photoshopping it together, working with a UX designer for a mock-up, jerry-rigging something in your authoring tool, whatever you think you can pull off in the time that you have, it's going to help, I promise. This was just an example that our UX manager made. We had 2 new doc tools that we wanted to have in our documentation. We'd never done them before. And so they took a topic of content that we had already written and some component designs for the product that we already had and slapped them together. And it really got people excited. They were kind of blown away that we wanted to do this with the docs, because our docs previously had been very boring. And it got them invested in the project a lot more than they would have been if they hadn't seen it in their own design and branding. So finally, you've gotten all your points together. You've gotten all your examples. Do not make the mistake of forgetting to prioritize them and just listing them in the same order you did the comp analysis in. Ask me how I know. This comes back to knowing your audience. What is most important to them? What is going to get their buy-in as early as possible? You want to lead with that. It might be that your comp analysis supported something they already wanted to do, right? Or it might be that you want to do something that came out of their most valued competitor. For the design system guide, we absolutely led with the fact that we wanted to use SAP's depth of information, because the same VP who really likes their work was one of our stakeholders. This is going to soften up your more difficult stakeholders. They're much more likely to listen to your more out-of-the-box ideas or the places where you disagree with them on if they've already bought into part of your proposal. You also want to make sure that you're heading off objections before they're raised. You want to know going in what they're going to object to so that you can make sure you're addressing that first. They're going to trust you more. You build that trust, they're more likely to agree with you. And then lastly, make sure you don't oversell. Let your examples speak for themselves. You want to explain them, but don't keep hammering the point home beyond where it's necessary. And this is doubly true if you are arguing against something that one of your stakeholders wants to do. Comes back to what problem were they actually trying to solve back in the beginning when they first asked you to do something that you thought was ridiculous? If you have done your comp analysis correct, then you should have data and examples that show a different way to solve that problem, a better way to solve that problem. Give them those examples, explain it, explain why it's really good. And you might not actually even need to explain why it's better than what was originally proposed. If you can read the room, you might see they're already with you and agreeing with you, and you can just skip over that part entirely. If you can't, then you can really tactfully come in and say, and here are a couple of the reasons why we think that this is better than doing it this way, right? Without naming whoever asked you to do it that way. So hopefully, you now understand how you can plan and run a comp analysis and use it to get your stakeholders buy-in. Whether you've got a really small content strategy problem or a very large one, having that real-world data and examples can be really, really helpful for getting their buy-in and getting your project up and running. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. I keep getting all of these talks that I'm really interested in. It's so weird. It's like this conference is for people like me. All right, we got a couple questions here ready for you. I think you answered this one already, but I just want to make you say it anyway. PDFs, yay or nay?
I am nay. Unfortunately, every company I've worked for is yay, and I have yet to win an argument for getting rid of them. I'm still working on it. I'll let you guys know how it goes.
Is there actually?
I'll let you all folks know how it goes. Sorry.
Is there data that supports that people are actually, like, you have to provide the PDF and they can't just like click print?
Well, it's a lot more difficult to set up a good click print function than it is to create a PDF from the same content.
It's like, don't try to retrain the user, just meet them where they are kind of thing.
Yeah. If you can have them click print and then it gives them the PDF, I think that's a really good solution. But that can be a little bit hard to set up too.
Yeah, agreed. This is also something that I personally have struggled with. What was one surprising finding you've come across during one of your competitive analyses?
That is a really good question. I mean, the PDFs one surprised me. I really thought that I would find that nobody provided them. The tabs functionality in the design system guides, did not see that coming. It's not super responsive. But again, the use case is usually you're looking at it on a desktop, unless you are specifically a mobile developer, which is not what we were researching. So that one was definitely a little surprising. I also was mind-boggled by SAP's information architecture. I'm very sorry if anybody here works for SAP. Like I said, depth of information was fabulous, but their navigation and their information architecture was truly, like, talk about something that definitely got, like, put together by a bunch of different teams who were all thinking on their own and naming it internally.
I know a little bit about how that feels.
It's a wasted opportunity when it's good content.
So are you generally reviewing the competitors' documents from a technical writing perspective or from the perspective of a regular end user and how they would read the documents, and talk a little bit about if it's hard to separate yourself.
Yeah, you do really have to kind of separate yourself. So that was why I was saying break it into two parts. Look at it as an objective fact finder. That's the technical writer side of the brain, right? You're looking at what choice did they make. Just document what choice they made. And then you want to sit back and say, okay, so I am now a UX designer who knows nothing about writing. And what do I see when I come in here and I look at this? And how does that affect my experience? What am I thinking about when I'm looking at it? What am I scoffing at? What am I intrigued by? Like that kind of thing.
Do you record the things that you're scoffing at?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
I try to explain why and how it impacts the UX so that it's legitimate, but you know.
Sometimes it is just a. Ugh.
Again, you saw the notes. There was a note in there that literally just said why ? That was a real comp analysis. I did not make that up for this presentation.
All right. From Kylie, we have what are your capitalized thoughts on AI to help with the analysis, especially on solo teams where time is extremely limited? Maybe not the entire analysis, but parts that could maybe be easily generated?
So my general thoughts on AI are go away. I do appreciate that if you are a sole writer trying to do something like this, it's really time consuming and it's really hard because you don't have anything to bounce stuff off of, or anyone to bounce things off of. I'm not sure how good it would do. You know, if you can feed it a document and say, I'm looking for how they do X, I don't know how good or accurate that would be. I would say if you wanted to try it, I would do, like I said, you're sharing the burden, right? Do an example first. Give them that example, and then ask them to analyze the same information from that. Maybe not the exact same doc set, but like a same doc set for a different product, right? And see what they come back with. And if it's at all close to what you think it could be, and you're in that situation where you really just do not have the bandwidth, you do not have the people to help you, it's fair to try.
About how long should an analysis on one competitor take, approximately?
So it's a good question. I try not to take more than I try to set aside like one afternoon per competitor. Doesn't mean you can't do it faster than that. And it's easier if you're the one who did all the prep work. Because if you're the one who did all the prep work, you've already looked at these a little bit. You're more just like formalizing your thoughts and looking at more specifics than you were before. But yeah, for me, I will just continue on and on until somebody taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, what are you doing? So I time box it. I try to find like heads down time for one single competitor for one afternoon, one morning, and that's generally plenty of time.
Cool. So this is kind of related, but when you are distilling the information down for presentation to the stakeholders, especially if those stakeholders are like, high-level people that are like, just give me the salient bits, like, how do you anticipate the things that, are going to be the sticking points for them, like the SAP person? And like, how do you know what to put in there to sway them in the direction that, or do you want to sway them? Like maybe you're objective and you want them to choose. Like how does that generally work?
Yeah, I actually found if you're objective and you want them to choose, it's harder because then nobody decides. And then you don't want to know what to do when you went out. So I do recommend not going in completely objective. Sure, go in with if we end up either direction, that's okay. But I would go in with a proposal that you want to do, that you feel good about. The kind of hemming and hawing about which one is the best should probably happen in your team space and in your team discussions. And you might have a backup plan where if you think somebody might object and you think there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do, then I would have a backup plan. But I wouldn't present it as, these are our two options, please tell us what to do. Because if you have good stakeholders and good executives, they're going to turn around and go, don't I pay you to be the expert? I've had that happen. It's not fun. So I was in a luxury where I kept presenting to the same stakeholders over and over again. So I got a chance to refine and understand where their thoughts and feelings were. But if you're doing this for the first time with stakeholders you don't know very well, try to lean on other folks in the company who know them well. and have done this before, even if it's not someone that you work with all the time. It's easiest if it's someone in kind of an adjacent team to you. Like if you're writing and you're doing dev docs, you might talk to the developers, you might talk to the PMs, you might talk to your UX designers if you're more on the UI side of things. Because I guarantee you there is someone else who has done something like this with those stakeholders. And ask them, what do you think are going to be the biggest, what do they usually gravitate toward? What are they usually asking you about? What are they always focused on, right? There are trigger words for stakeholders, just like there are for us normal folks. And sometimes if you say them, then the entire thing goes off the rails. And it's really helpful if you know that beforehand.
Yeah, avoid. So it's user research, right? Like you said, know your audience.
Exactly.
Do the research ahead of time, anticipate what they're going to like or not like, and figure out how to steer the ship in the direction that you want.
Yes.
Cool. Give me 1 second. Was there a competitor whose IA or documentation design really impressed you? And if so, what did you like about it?
I love Atlassian's design system guide, to be totally honest. That, at least, the state it was in 2021, 2022. Haven't checked on it in a long time. But their documentation in general is always really clear. Their information architecture, like I said, it was really broken down into the tenets of good UX design. And if you're a UI developer, you're usually following along on not on the coattails, but the UX designer is doing the work first, and then you're coming along as the UI developer to figure out how to implement it. So you're kind of working under the same umbrella and the same paradigm that the UX designer is. And so, when you're looking at how it was just organized around just good design practices. It was organized around the double diamond approach and what types of categories people think about them in, right? They had styling information. They had foundations that had the grids and all of that stuff. So it was so clear. Every UX designer we put it in front of was yeah, this makes complete sense. Why would you organize it any other way?
Nice. That's kind of the holy grail.
Yeah.
The other holy grail. I had another one there and I lost it. Give me 1 sec. There is a good one here about stakeholders. So stakeholders are not just leadership or managers, but often the tech team that has to make things happen. Have you ever found a clear winning way and not been able to make it the choice for your team because of tech limitations or tech pushback? So what's the situation in which it's not, I can't do that because I use foo. It's let's just pick the best thing and then we'll figure out the technical stuff later.
Yeah, I think make friends with your developers if you have not already made friends with your developers, right? If you're in dev docs, that's usually easier. You've probably already made friends with them. If you're in UI docs, sometimes you don't. But developers, I have found that you can ask questions and you can suss out which developer is willing to be well, we could do that if X, right? Because that's the sticker is when they just say no and walk away. But if you can get them to say, well, why not, right? And just use that technical writing annoyance factor of you won't stop asking questions, right? Don't argue with them. Don't argue with them. Just say, well, but why not? And then they tell you the first level reason why. And then you say, okay, but why wouldn't it work if X? Or what about if you use something else? Or what would it take to make it work, right? And sometimes the answer is mind-bogglingly simple, and they're just stuck in their track of this is how we've done it, this is how we've always done it. And we get that way too about the docs, right? It's something that happens to everybody when you're doing the same thing every day. But asking those why questions, being the annoying toddler in the room, that is my best path forward. And then you can find out which developers are the real secrets to bringing that information to the rest of the team, to the executives, to their manager, whoever it is that needs to say it can happen.
It's the Gretchen Wieners. You have to find the Gretchen Wieners. That's a Mean Girls reference.
Yeah.
Just in case there's younger folks in the room who aren't with me. I'm afraid that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for this. It's been a delight. And tell your horse I said hi. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We have snack time. Go have a snack and come back at 2:25. Thanks, y'all.